Hey folks, I'm preparing to play a game of Tenkatoitsu. This is published by Hexasims Games and features 3 battles from the Japanese Sengoku Jidai period, a period of great social and political turmoil in Japanese history. It features 3 battles. I'm playing the first one, Yamazaki, from 1582, but also included the battles of Nagakute, 1584, and the famous Sekigahara from 1600. Now, the art in this is outstanding. Really nice map art, as you can see. Gives a real sense of, I guess, the location where these battles are taking place. The counter art is very clear and functional. And these counters represent the different clans that took part in the battle. There are about 15 different groupings of these per side. You can see they're labelled A, B, C, D, and so forth. I won't go into the details on the various factors, but basically they have leadership, they have elan, and so forth, which affects mainly their combat abilities. Now, the game system revolves around a chit pull activation system, which has become quite common these days, but it incorporates a few other features. So units that you plan to activate, let's say I want to activate this I clan here, Fujita Yukimasa. He may not necessarily activate, he may become delayed. The messenger sent to communicate orders to him may be killed or get lost or head elsewhere, and he may not activate. So there's this unpredictability to your activations and your battle plans. Combat is also fairly unpredictable. There are various factors. You have a series of orders you can give to your clan. So you might plan to attack with this Yukimasa clan. They may need to change their orders. They may need to regroup or defend or move elsewhere. And you can place these little order tokens on top of your clans to indicate what they're doing. Now, historically, this is Mitsuhide, who had betrayed the daimyo and tried to grab power for himself. And in response, the daimyo had to commit suicide. And in response, his armies, in this case this one led by Hideyoshi, have marched against Mitsuhide, and they've kind of cornered him near this castle of Shoryuji-jo. So Mitsuhide is on the defensive. The heights up here provide a strategic advantage. Whoever controls these 2 yellow areas gains an extra command point, meaning they can activate more of their units. And so Mitsuhide, early in the battle, tried to push his troops out across. They had been defending along this river, and they've pushed out to try and capture the heights. And this is where Hideyoshi launched his counterattack, and historically utterly defeated Mitsuhide's forces. And I think as Mitsuhide tried to run away, he was killed by just some rebels in the area. So this the battle takes place just as Mitsuhide's forces have begun to cross that river. Now there's the option here: I can attempt to continue driving over that mountain to try to capture those heights to gain that strategic advantage, or I can go on the defensive and maybe pull back to this river to better defensive terrain. Now, given Mitsuhide is, it seems, pretty vastly outnumbered, I think that may be the better course of action. So I'm going to try to take a defensive stance and pull back my right flank behind this river. That should offer me some defensive benefits. Now Hideyoshi is going to try to push as much as possible around this left-hand side here. All his forces are up in the right, and again, historically he hit Mitsuhide on this flank here. and then struck on the right over here. So I guess I'm going to try and do something similar. Bring all these forces who are lined up around to the right. The rules are quite remarkable. There's something different. They include rules for ninjas, because the night before battle, Hideyoshi sent ninjas into Mitsuhide's camp, which disrupted everything. They burnt a few buildings and so forth. It includes this awesome fortification here, Soyuji-jo, and there's a separate little battle map which shows the movement of forces around and throughout that castle. There are rules for, fire combat, Elan, samurais that appear, heroic samurais that can appear. There are rules for fatigue. Very, very thematic, very detailed, but it's going to create some very interesting combat situations. So that's the game. That's my battle plan. As I said, shifting out these forces around here. I'll report back at the end of the first turn just to see how things have been going. Yeah! Alright, here's the result of the first combat activation of the first term. We drew Hideyoshi's combat activation counter, which meant that all of his units that were under attack orders and in range had to charge nearby defenders. So they've moved up against those defenders near the river and have launched their assaults against those units. The way combat works is basically you have to attack all defenders that you're adjacent to. I'll give you the example of the last combat that occurred here. These two attackers attacked this defender here. You roll 2 blue and 2 red die, and then you add basically combat modifiers to all of these rolls. So to the blue die, you add because they're assaulting, you add the attacking unit's Elan, which is from 10, it goes up 1, 2, 3 to 13. Because they're not attacking across the river. They are attacking defenders in close ranks. So subtract the defender's firepower, which was 1. So 10 plus 3 minus 1 is 12. So that's the attacking column 12. You then determine the red row. So we have 7. You add the attacker's mass, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you subtract the defender's Elan and mass, which was only 2 for these guys. So 7 plus 3 minus 2 is 8. Yeah, that's right. So it is 12 column, 8 row, which gives us a D2-1 result, which means the main defending unit takes 2 hits, and any other defending area units suffer 1 extra hit. So basically, 2 hits would give 1 hit would give them this counter, 2 hits flips them over. So they're down to sort of half strength. And we did this throughout the line. So there was 1 hit called mutual exchange here, nothing here, nothing here. 2 hits on the defender here, and 1 hit on the defender here. So pretty mild opening combat. Some heavy losses out here, I guess, which was nice. The river sort of hurting a lot of the attacks. Some pretty high rolls, I guess, for the opening attack. But yeah, that's what's happening in our opening round of combat. That's how combat works. Yeah! Okay, so I'm just at the start of the first turn, and I thought I'd show the initial orders that I've placed on these units. As you can see over here, most of Mitsuhide's units are under defense orders. If there's no actual order counter on them, they're considered to be under defense orders. As you can see, they're in a good position alongside that river, so most of these units will just defend along that river's edge. I've got 2 units that have crossed the river here. These guys are just defending that road with some help from the Moriano clan over here. And these 4 units out on the flank. have decided to regroup or withdraw behind the river. They're going to try and pull back and take advantage of that river, as I said earlier. Now, on the other hand, many of Hideyoshi's units in the front line are under attack orders. So you can see all along here, these clans are going to try and attack. I've given these guys attack orders as well, and they're going to try and pin down these units before they can regroup. So they're hoping for an activation before Mitsuhide's men can pull back. Most of the rest of Hideyoshi's forces are under move orders. You can see all these units around here. Most of these units around here are going to try and move throughout here to take up a position out below Mount Tenno. This is the mountain up here, and try and exploit. There's a lot of open space out here where the river ends. They also have too many forces, which basically send in. There's no stacking in this game. It's only one unit per hex, and with all these units, they need to move out into the space and exploit their, I guess, numerical superiority. Now, so on this first turn, I've thrown both sides have 4 command points. I've thrown these 4 clans in for Mitsuhide, and Hideyoshi has thrown this E clan in. This is Kiyohide. Again, they're going to try and attack before they can withdraw, and there's a lot of movement at the back here. So I think G, M, and N clans have been thrown into the cup as well, and they're just going to move along into this space out here. Yeah! Alright, here's the result of the first combat activation of the first term. We drew Hideyoshi's combat activation counter, which meant that all of his units that were under attack orders and in range had to charge nearby defenders. So they've moved up against those defenders near the river and have launched their assaults against those units. The way combat works is basically you have to attack all defenders that you're adjacent to. I'll give you the example of the last combat that occurred here. These 2 attackers attacked this defender here. You roll 2 blue and 2 red die, and then you add basically combat modifiers to all of these rolls. So to the blue die, you add because they're assaulting, you add the attacking unit's elan, which is from 10, it goes up 1, 2, 3 to 13. Because they're not attacking across the river, they are attacking defenders in closed ranks. So subtract the defender's firepower, which was 1. So 10 plus 3 minus 1 is 12. So that's the attacking column 12. You then determine the red row. So we have 7. You add the attacker's mass, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you subtract the defender's elan and mass, which was only 2 for these guys. So 7 plus 3 minus 2 is 8. Yeah, that's right. So it is 12 column, 8 row, which gives us a D2-1 result, which means the main defending unit takes 2 hits, and any other defending area units suffer 1 extra hit. So basically, 2 hits would give 1 hit would give them this counter, 2 hits flips them over. So they're down to sort of half strength. And we did this throughout the line. So there was 1 hit called mutual exchange here, nothing here, nothing here. 2 hits on the defender here, and 1 hit on the defender here. So pretty mild opening combat. Some heavy losses out here, I guess, which was nice. The river sort of hurting a lot of the attacks. Some pretty high rolls, I guess, for the opening attack. But yeah, that's what's happening in our opening round of combat. That's how combat works. Yeah! Alright, here we are at the end of the first turn. And as you can see, there's this sort of engagement of the clans along this river here, and Hideyoshi's troops are trying to move around behind that. Because there's no stacking, it's a bit of reserves over in the back here, but most of these guys are going to try and move into their space and use their, as I said earlier, their numerical superiority to pin down those defenders if they can in this area. Now, in response, as you saw earlier, Mitsuhide's troops have moved around here. They've extended their line to try and prevent that, defend on the far side of the river, which slows down marginally those initial assaults. But once those initial assaults are done, the initial charges, it's melee combat, and it's really weight of numbers. Now, the Mitsuhide's combat activation went very poor. You can see a number of reduced and wounded units throughout here. They suffered an elimination in their combat phase over here. They were forced to attack the enemy in their zone of control, and that gives 1 victory point to Hideyoshi. That's the situation at the end of the first turn. There were 2 clan activation chits still in the cup, and when that happens, you roll on the messenger table. One of those rolls simply meant that the order was cancelled, and that clan activation goes back to reserve. The other one was delayed by 2 turns, so that clan goes on the delay track, and they're going to be, that was J clan, which is, I think they're down here somewhere here. So these guys won't be able to activate for 2 turns. They're in a good position anyway, so it's not too much of a negative consequence. Yeah, so a lot of fighting, still a lot of movement. These guys all locked in zones of control, so the fighting will continue into the second turn, and I suspect there'll be movement around here in this coming turn. Yeah! Alright, here we are at the end of the second turn, so more fighting along the river, which saw the elimination of 2 more of Mitsuhide's units. Where were they? There was one up the top here, which was eliminated through combat out here, and then one of them was pounced upon by this Yoritaka clan down here, and they were very quickly eliminated in combat. Very high rolls. All 3 of these clan units attacked a single defending clan of Kamon clan and eliminated them in combat. What else has happened? More casualties along the front. Given their failure in combat last turn, Mitsuhide's units are trying not... A lot of these are non-obligatory combat Hexasims, which means they don't have to attack, and so they're trying not to, because combat is not really faring in their favour. We did see, because of these elimination of Mitsuhide's units and Hideyoshi's victory points pushing up, they're now on 8 victory points, including the elimination of 2 leaders. So they have 2 what are called Bandori points for the killing of leaders. Because of that being pushed up, the victory point is 8-0. We saw 2 of these samurai markers being placed in the cup, and when they're drawn out, we can place them on units for various effects. They serve as a leader, but in this case they actually rallied this unit. You roll to rally. They rolled a 6 + 1 is a 7, which lets them rally 3 steps, so they were back up to full strength. And we had another samurai drawn down here, and that let me activate this unit for change their orders and attack. And they charged against these aggressive moving clan of Hidanaga, and they did attack here whilst they were in movement, which gives them a positive modifier. Unfortunately, it was only enough to cause a retreat, so they were just pushed back a little bit. They're now exposed across the river, which is a bit dangerous. They're not a very strong clan. You can tell by their sort of elan and mass numbers on the right there. Yeah, so here comes Hideyoshi's clans on the right here. They're about to hit that line. More troops moving around the mountain, around Mount Tenno on the right there. And this clan down here, this is the Mitsuyashu clan. They're sort of swinging around the left here. So we may have to start changing the orders of some of these defending clans to regroup, which will enable them to withdraw and pull back away from battle. These are all little first casualty markers. When a unit suffers a second hit, they are flipped over to their reduced side. When they suffer a third hit, they become like this unit here, reduced with a hit marker, and a 4th hit will eliminate them. All right. So that's the situation at the end of the second turn. We ran right through the turn. There were no counters left in the cup, so there were no delayed orders that turn. Everything's quite clear in terms of communication. All right, that's the end of the second turn. We'll report back shortly. Yeah! All right, here we are at the end of another turn, and as you can see, Hideyoshi has really pushed away those defenders from the river, particularly in the north there. You can see this clan here again, Mitsuyashu, has crossed over the first and then the second river here. They're going to try and get around behind these defenders. Mitsuhide's defenders have begun to, you can see these regroup markers. They're trying to pull back behind the river, moving back to the fortress, trying to reform their line. Doing pretty well. Getting some early regroup activations, which is enabling them to withdraw. It's only when they have to fight in combat that they're suffering losses. Hideyoshi's blue and white forces are just outnumbering them, pinning them down in many places, cutting off their retreat. You can see this unit here had a very lucky final combat activation and forced the defenders to retreat. They rolled very high in their combat. But elsewhere, things certainly going the way of Hideyoshi pushing forward. You can see down the south here, we have Yoritaka clan beginning to move up and attack. All these clans now in attack formation. Mitsuhide tried to, he quite boldly activated his clan to attack, crossed over the river, and forced some defenders back, but without really causing any losses. Having said that, further north here, there was the first elimination of Kiyohide clan, this E clan here. We had an elimination there which has gained 2 victory points, but that's about it. So that's the end of the turn for now. Yeah! Alright, here we are at the end of the turn, and things are going pretty well for Hideyoshi. He has really forced Mitsuhide's these brown and orange colour burgundy troops back. They've started to just regroup and pull back away from the fighting behind that second river and towards Shoryuji Fort. In many cases they've been trapped by zones of control. You can see up here they've been locked down. These guys stuck in the fighting. There's another unit around here which has been surrounded by zones of control, so they haven't been able to retreat and are suffering pretty badly in combat. Despite this, despite Mitsuhide pulling back and not wanting to fight, they have managed to inflict, I think they inflicted 2 eliminations on Hideyoshi's blue and white units this turn, which has bumped their victory point up a little bit. It is now Hideyoshi on 12 to Mitsuhide on 5. So there's not too much of a differential there. So what happened this turn is... okay, so something I've just noticed is I tried to activate Mitsuhide to withdraw. I gave him special tactical orders to retreat. And I've just realised that his counter wasn't drawn from the cup. So his orders may be delayed, which is interesting because he's in command. So I don't know what happens when the commander tries to give orders to himself and his clan to activate. I'll need to follow that up. But there were 3 counters in the cup. In fact, his was the only Mitsuhide side counter remaining. There were 2 of Hideyoshi's counters, which may be delayed for coming turns. But as you can see here, Hideyoshi's troops now circling around this is the north side of the board, so they're circling around the northern flank here, and this clan up here, Mitsuyashu, yet to be engaged in any combat, are advancing around. They've just changed to attack orders, so they'll be looking to charge around here. They are crossing the river here and looking to move on here. So that's the general state of the game. These guys trying to pull back behind the river, reform their lines, whilst Hideyoshi's blue and white troops are trying to push forward, pin down those defenders, and stop them from doing so, stop them getting to this castle. Alright, so that's the end of the turn. I'll report back shortly. Yeah! Alright, the end of another turn, and as you can see here, Hideyoshi's forces have really cleared the battlefield quite quickly in this turn, cleaning up a lot of the remaining defenders in that area along the river on Mitsuhide's side. Still just one unit putting up some defence here. They have been trying to change their orders but failing. This clan up here, Misuyasu, have now crossed the river and have charged this unit. They only suffered losses actually in their attempt to counterattack. Elsewhere, as you can see down here, Mitsuhide's units are now entering the fortress. So they've acknowledged that they've lost the field and are pulling back, and they're hoping to get some strength into that fort to put up a better fight in the siege. There's a few units trying to slow down the attackers, still putting up a defence along here and out here. But if you look over here, you can see the rest of those Hideyoshi forces advancing quite rapidly through that open area. And they should, well, you can see already here, the advanced units have already reached the outskirts of the fortress, so we'll probably have some fortress action over the next turn or two. The victory point differential now, it's Hideyoshi's forces are on 16. They killed another leader that turn. In fact, they inflicted a few casualties, which bumped up the victory points, and they killed a leader along the way, whereas Mitsuhide's forces remain on 5 victory points. But, as I said, the battle is about to change as we head towards the fortress, so we'll see what happens over the next couple of turns. Yeah! Alright, here we are at the end of another turn, and this is the battlefield. As you can see, Akechi Mitsuhide's troops have pulled back as much as possibly behind this river. A number of them have stacked into this fort. They're waiting for the attack to come from Hideyoshi's troops. Hideyoshi is trying to advance as much as possible. They had a few units which were activated with fast movement. You can see these clans down here have really advanced to the castle. A couple of pursuits took place. You can see these troops down here. And yeah, a few more casualties as well. Now this is a pretty quick turn. Now we're into the fatigue stage of the game. The battle's been going for some time, and from now on you don't continue until 5 compulsory activation chits are drawn. Instead you end the turn when both sides have drawn their combat activation counters, and that happened relatively early. We only had a few activations early on, meaning all of Hideyoshi's troops here don't get to move this turn. It's getting pretty late. There's only about 5 more turns left to go. So Hideyoshi's going to try and assault that castle. Having said that, they're way ahead on victory points. They're now 18 to 5, so they're ahead by 13. They're going to continue attacking. Mitsuhide's trying to slow down the attackers. It's the same old story. We'll report back soon and let you know how it goes. Yeah! Alright folks, another turn over, and this turn we saw Hideyoshi's troops commence their siege. So Mitsuhide's troops have been moving into here, withdrawing. You can see they're falling back even further around the north here. I'm just worried about being charged by these units up in the east over here. Most of his troops have now withdrawn into Shoryuji-jo, the castle area here. Now, Nobutaka first advanced. They changed their orders and attacked. Now, I think it's 3 movement points to move into the castle. They have to be right adjacent to it, which they now are. When this happens, we shift our attention to this siege board over here. Now, first thing we do is we add up the manpower of the attackers and defenders, and their manpower is basically the sum. I think it's shown somewhere around here. Here we are. the sum of elan and mass of units in good order or shaken, which was huge for the defenders because they've got a few clans in there. They can then spend that manpower to place all these control markers to control the various areas of the castle. When the attackers begin to move in, they also calculate their manpower, and they can do something similar. They basically place their control markers on the outskirts, their control areas, and begin to move into the castle area. The problem is, I've immediately ran out of control markers. These are all the control markers that I've had. They're all on the board. So I don't know if I'm meant to use replacements, use something else as a substitute, or if I'm basically trying to control too many areas as Mitsuhide, and I should be just focusing on the one or two small areas. So I've placed all the control markers that came with the game, and I'm at a point now where I'm not sure what to do with this siege. There hasn't been a siege resolution yet, so they had the combat activation to move into the complex, but I haven't had any actual siege activities yet. At the end of the turn, so this will happen on the next turn. So I'll do a closer reading of the rules and try and figure out what actually happens. Unfortunately, Hideyoshi's troops weren't given much opportunity to move up. There was a bit of movement in the back here. As I said, the Nobutaka clan moved up. But again, there were only 2 clan activations from Hideyoshi. And that didn't give them much opportunity to do much to advance. They really these guys need to change orders to movement to move up to the fort. And maybe Nobutaka should have waited for the rest of Hideyoshi's forces to arrive, but I was pretty keen to check out what happens here. A bit impetuous, perhaps, in their attack on the siege. So that's what's happened. It's the end of another turn. There are only, I think, 4 more turns left. No casualties, no further casualties that turn. So pretty uneventful apart from that siege getting started. Yeah! Okay, so I've just drawn the Hideyoshi combat chit, which has enabled me to engage in the first siege phase of the game. Now the way this works is you work out the siege actions for the player whose combat activation chit was drawn, so Hideyoshi, and this is equal to their 1 plus their firepower value. Now fortunately, the Nobutaka clan has very good firepower. Each of the units has 2 firepower, so that's a total of 6. So they get 1 plus 6 is 7 actions. With these actions, you can see here they can engage in a number of different activities. They can declare an advantage, they can move troops, conduct an assault, fire their guns, or rally their troops. Now what I've done here is, well, I first tried to, I think, conduct an assault. That was unsuccessful. That's 1 siege action done. Realising how hard that was, I then tried to fire the guns instead, focusing on this area. And I think I had to launch 3 consecutive fire attacks before I eventually rolled high enough. You can see fire the guns summary here, rolled high enough to eliminate that control marker. When that was eliminated, I think on about the 4th action, I moved troops in to control this area. And then I spent my remaining 1 or 2 actions, I think I spent 2 actions trying to fire the guns on this area. And I was successful on my final activation. But I didn't have any remaining to move my troops in. So I have advanced the siege, I've moved my control into here, and I've eliminated the defenders from here, but I didn't have enough to move in. Now something I was doing wrong earlier, you may have noticed I had 3 control markers here. That was, I've understood the situation now. You have 1 control marker per area, you don't have multiples, and it just represents control of those individual areas. Either Hideyoshi or Mitsuhide control each area. It's not an indication of strength. I misunderstood that. So there you have it. You count your siege actions. You take these actions one at a time, and Hideyoshi will try to gradually push his troops into the siege. As they're doing so, you have these manpower indicators which shows the strength of the defenders or the attackers, and certain actions will reduce your manpower. So you can sacrifice manpower. You can, I think you can exhaust. Yeah, you exhaust your manpower points to modify your die rolls. You can use your action points to declare an advantage, which also gives you a +1 dice roll modifier. So yeah, pretty straightforward once I understood it. I was just a bit confused about those control markers and how they work, but it's all been cleared up now. Okay, so at the end of another turn, and Mitsuhide also had their siege activation phase. Small clarification, you either eliminate a control marker or lose 1 point of manpower. So you can either lose troops, lose your strength, or give up ground. Now, Mitsuhide had about 10 siege activations. So they were just launching firepower after firepower. You can see here they advanced, moved their troops in, they attacked here with firepower, had a good numerical advantage, and Hideyoshi decided to give some ground up here. They launched firepower attacks along these positions, and as you can see, Hideyoshi's decided to give up some manpower instead of giving up the ground. So they've pulled back a little bit to their base areas, but now they're just losing manpower. They do have a number of troops on the outskirts of the castle about to, you can see these are under attack orders, these are under attack orders. These two clans would like to change orders, unfortunately. Another quick turn. 2 combat activations were drawn pretty early, and so the turn ends, because we are in that fatigue phase. Once 2 combat chits are drawn, the turn ends. So the siege continues. Yeah! Okay, so the second chit of this turn, we've drawn the Hideyoshi combat chit, and I'm going to run through this siege phase just to give you an idea of how it all works. So, Nagahide clan has moved into the fortress now under assault activations, and they bring with them 3 firepower values and a leader as well. And we add the highest leadership value. So that gives them 6 plus 5, 11 what are they called? Siege activation points that they can use, which I'll track on these dice. Okay, I'm going to try and focus on this area around here. So the first thing I want to do is firepower on this space here. I'm going to start by rolling a d6. It's a 5. I add friendly control markers. There's only 1 adjacent, so I add 6. I subtract the line of attack defense, which is 2. So 6 minus 2 is 4. If I roll 4 or more, I succeed, and the defenders can either eliminate their unit or reduce their manpower. At this stage, they're just going to reduce their manpower and they increase their out of combat. That's 1. I've got 10 more of these to do. Second one, it's a 3. That's not going to be enough. I know that I need basically, I think a 3, 4, a 5 or a 6, I think. Yeah, I need at least a 5. Alright, so that's down to 9. That's a 6. That's going to be another manpower reduction. It's, I guess, they're striking a balance between giving ground and managing their manpower. You can recover your manpower by rallying the troops. When you rally the troops in a siege, you basically just roll the die and transfer a point. If you get a 5 or a 6, you transfer a point from out of combat to your manpower. So you're kind of balancing off these two, trying to keep them, or trying to keep your manpower score high without giving too much ground. Okay, another firepower. 4 plus 1 is 5, minus 2 is 3. No effect, again needing a 5 or a 6. 4, again. I'm just going to run through these and then I'll show you the effects afterwards. Okay, so I just ran through the combat. After I showed briefly a series of fire attacks on the defenders, which wasn't getting me anywhere, so I decided to switch to assaults. Now, assaulting a position is really a way to force a decision in an area, but it is more costly in terms of manpower. As I said, fire wasn't getting me anywhere, so assaults are a way to try to force a decision. The way this works is the attacker adds the number of their adjacent counters. They can sacrifice manpower to gain a bonus. They can also declare an advantage by spending a siege point. The defender can sacrifice as well, and they add their defense modifier. So I've been trying to assault this area here, and in fact I launched 2 assaults on that area. Both sides roll a die and they add their modifiers. In the first assault there was a 1-point difference with the defender having the advantage. This means that the attacker suffers a manpower loss, and they gain, I think, out of combat losses. I then launched another attack again with sacrifice and attacker declaring the advantage, and in this case it's a tie. And when there's a tie, the attacker loses manpower, but they can also try to force a decision by losing more manpower, which they did. The defender can either then give ground, or they can also sacrifice more manpower to hold on to the position. As you can see here, that's exactly what they've done. So both sides are really dropping in manpower. The reason the attackers are doing this is because, well, they currently have a manpower advantage, and they have more troops about, or I'm hoping they're about to enter the fortress, which will, give them a boost to their manpower. Whereas Mitsuhide's forces defending are pretty limited in their manpower. They're going to have to start giving up ground. They don't have too much manpower left to sacrifice. Having said that, this is the third last turn. There are only 2 more turns left. So there are not too many combat. There's going to be at least, well, at most, 2 more Hideyoshi combat activations left in the battle. Alright, so yeah, ground not really giving up yet, but certainly a lot of manpower losses on both sides. Okay, well, Mitsuhide has his activation, and as you can see, blistering wave of fire attacks. He only had 9 activations, but because Hideyoshi's manpower score was already relatively low, those 9 attacks were all, as you can see here, they've got a number of control markers adjacent to this area. Each of those adjacent control markers is a +1 Dora modifier. Yeah, you add the number of friendly control markers adjacent to the area under attack, subtract the smallest defense value, which is 0, and you only need 4 or more, so it's almost a guaranteed fire success. Each success then reduces the manpower by 1, which very quickly went down to 0. Their out of combat score rose very quickly. Once they were out of manpower, they have to start eliminating troops. And again, there are only 3 control markers on the map, so it's boom, 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 they're gone. Now, once the attacker has no control marker and no manpower, then all units on their side that participated in the siege are eliminated. Okay, poor Nobutataka clan. All these units are gone. Sieges. I should have waited for all those other troops to arrive. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 victory points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for Mitsuhide clan. Pushes the victory point differential a bit closer, 19 to 18 now. So the victor adds their manpower score, which gives them their survivor score. You need to choose which of the units that participated in this assault. Okay, wow. Well, Mitsuhide has fought off the attackers with only a turn or 2 left. There's not much that Hideyoshi is going to do to attack. I think from here, they're not going to send any more troops into this attack. They're just into this fortress. The defenders just have too much in there. I think I'm going to call it here. Hideyoshi is going to surround that fortress, but not engage in any more attacks. So I'll declare, I guess, the end of the battle at this stage. They could certainly attack these 2 units here, but that's really inconsequential. The points differential here is now 8 points. So Hideyoshi leads by 6 to 10 victory points. This is a marginal victory for Hashiba Hideyoshi. He holds the battlefield. His only regret is not to have been able to capture Mitsuhide. This one commits seppuku as he realizes that he was no match. So there you go. It would have been nice to capture the fort and to capture Mitsuhide and eliminate some more of his troops. In hindsight, I shouldn't have entered. I should have waited. It's hard to do. You need to be under attack orders to enter the castle, and once units are under attack orders, this momentum drives them forward. Once fatigue hits, as it has for the last 5 or 6 turns, a lot of units won't activate. You can see on Hideyoshi's delay track, he has a number of his key clans. This is G, L, N, and J. You can see here L, G, J here. These are all delayed, so they aren't getting that bonus activation needed to push them towards the fort. There's this need to move fast, to be under movement orders, but also the need to be under attack orders to enter the castle. And it can be difficult to change orders. You basically, in most cases, you need a 4 or more to successfully change orders. Okay, so I'm going to declare this the end of the battle, and yeah, as I said, a marginal victory for Hideyoshi. It's a very interesting game. The clan activations works really well. You have to keep clans together. In most cases, you have to end their movement as much as possible with them touching or adjacent to each other, and there's a real sense of clan cohesion amongst all this. You can see, this is the Hidanaga clan together. This is a Hideyoshi clan together. They move and activate and fight together as clans. And you get this really nice sense that this is an army of clans loosely working together to achieve their objective. The combat, the order system works really well. It is nice that you have attack and defense and regroup orders. I find the order change system a little bit frustrating. It was at times hard to change orders, which seems it's just frustrating at times when you want these guys to attack and they can't. Or I want Hideyoshi clan to move up quickly and I just can't get the orders to them, or it's not drawn from the cup, particularly once that fatigue hits. As soon as 2 combat chits are drawn, these are the 3 chits I've drawn for this turn. 1 clan activation, which doesn't do much, and then 2 immediate combat activations, and that's the end of the turn. And these are the chits that are still left in the cup. And then there's combat. Combat is very interesting. You've got this system where the formations of, the status of your units are critical. Whether they are attacking on the move, whether units are defending under attack orders, or fighting moving attacker, or so forth. And this varies the modifiers that apply to the dice rolls. I don't understand it though. I don't understand why you have these different modifiers for different types of attack. Okay, so if you're attacking on the move, you're charging, you add your elan to the blue die. If it's just a melee, you add your elan to the red die. What does this red and blue? What do these dice represent? It's rolling dice without a sense of, is blue dice sort of your momentum and red dice is bloodlust or something? There is no sense of what is this, what is this, what does this column mean, what does this row mean, and so forth. Basically, you're hoping as the attacker to roll high because you score hits. As a defender, you're hoping to roll low. I found the river meaningless. It adds a -1 combat modifier to the blue dice, but in most cases, -1 isn't doing much. If you roll, an 11, okay, it's still a defender eliminated. I think that needs to be much more. I guess this is technically not a river. It's really just a light stream. This is the Agoura river along here, which is far more. It's bigger. This is just a very light stream, which didn't do much, but doesn't provide. It's again, the terrain effects are inconsequential in battle. there are a lot of these Hexasims which again provide combat modifiers against charging units, but again, it's only a -1 dice roll modifier to the blue dice, and -1 from 12 usually isn't much. Again, it's another game where attackers have the advantage in open combat. It is very difficult, basically, again, because they can choose who they want to attack. They can outnumber the defenders. And, I mean, when you've got, let's say, if these two units attack a single defender, that's a +7 cumulative dice roll modifier to, a +4. And that +3 is far more significant than the -1 that you get for attacking across a river. So the combat system itself is a little cumbersome. You're rolling 4 die, and then you're trying to keep track of the modifiers. So you roll this, and if you're charging, okay, so 8, you're adding your elan, you're subtracting terrain modifiers, usually just 1. If the attacker is if the defender is in movement or regroup, you add a further 2, I'm sorry. You're adding and subtracting modifiers for the state of the attackers, and then subtracting modifiers for the state of the defenders, just to get your blue die roll modifier. Let's say it works out at a 7. Okay, so we're on the 7 column. Then you do the same for the red die. And there's a lot of these plus and minus modifiers that you're trying to remember, and that in many cases are just no effect, inconsequential. So I would like to see that combat system streamlined a little bit. It doesn't feel thematic. It's just I like that there is this difference between elan and mass, but it's not explained. It works well once you hit the seed. In combat, it doesn't seem to mean anything. What is more meaningful is maneuvering of clans, having an entire clan isolate and crush a single isolated defending clan, and getting your units under the right orders at the right time to have them move and then change orders to attack. All up, very enjoyable, really nice narrative developing of Hideyoshi chasing Mitsuhide. You may recall Mitsuhide crossed the river here in another impetuous attack, and then I realised, oh no, he's the leader here. The 13-day daimyo, I think he was called, Mitsuhide, and then I thought he needs to get out of here and retreat before he's killed in battle. And wow, the fort, it was very interesting. I just, as I said earlier, I handled it wrong. It'd be very interesting to play this again, knowing what I now know about the siege rules. I don't know if I could. I mean, a lot of it, what I would want to do is get all the attackers to arrive at the same time. However, that's not always practical. As you can see here, these units are still under deploy. They can't enter the castle unless they're under attack orders, and I can't guarantee that. I need a die roll to change their orders, which is fun. It's interesting. It adds to the sort of uncertainty of battle. I've played this solo, and it's a very good solo game because of that uncertainty. You cannot plan perfectly, and that creates very interesting situations from a solo gamer's perspective. As I said, it works very well as a solo game. It would be very interesting as a 2-player game. There would be a lot of frustrations for each player. If you curse your die rolls in an average game, you'll be cursing even more in this game, where there are wild swings of fortune. This isn't a game that is determined by dice rolls, but it's certainly a game that will cause frustration by die rolls, failure to change orders. Rolling a 12 in combat to eliminate the defender, or rolling a 1 or a 2 in combat to eliminate the attacker if you're really unlucky. Again, those small combats won't make a lot of difference. It just will have you cursing your fortune. Let's just have a quick look at the losses. Here you go, Mitsuhide and Hideyoshi. It worked out with those. I mean, these are all the fortress siege losses, which were unforeseen. Pretty amazed at what happened there. But there you go. That is Yamazaki from Tenkatoitsu. Great game. Highly recommended for solo play. I can't comment on really how it works as a two-player game, but there you go. Very fun.